The wind howled through the ash waste, carrying with it the bitter smell of sulfur and ash. Velrith dragged herself across the blackened rocks, her wings too tired to carry her weight anymore. Behind her, carefully balanced on her back, rested a single egg. The shell was pale blue, marked with silver lines that caught what little light managed to pierce through the smoke-filled sky. She had been walking for 3 days since the council cast her out. 3 days without food, without rest, without hope. Her scales, once brilliant green like spring leaves, had turned dull and gray from the volcanic dust. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to stop, to give up, but the egg on her back kept her moving forward. Velrith remembered the trial as if it had happened moments ago, though it had been a week. The Dragon Council had gathered in the great crystal cave, their massive forms arranged in a circle around her. Elder Morvax had spoken first, his voice cold and final. "You have broken the oldest law of our kind," he had said, his golden eyes showing no mercy. "The winter months are forbidden for laying eggs. Spring is the only season when hatchlings can survive. You know this. Every dragon knows this." Velrith had tried to defend herself. She had explained that the egg had come unexpectedly, that nature did not always follow the rules that dragons made. She had begged them to understand that she could not simply stop the egg from coming. It was not something she had chosen, but the council did not care about her explanations. Laws were laws, and they had been followed for thousands of years. To break them was to threaten the entire dragon race, or so they claimed. The punishment was always the same: exile to the ash waste where nothing lived and nothing grew. "Take your egg and go," Elder Morvax had commanded. "If you or your offspring survive, then perhaps the old gods favor you. If not, then nature has made its judgment." Now, as Velrith collapsed beside a jagged boulder, she wondered if the old gods had abandoned her completely. The ash waste stretched in every direction, endless and dead. No trees grew here. No grass, no rivers, no prey animals to hunt. There was only rock and fire and poisonous smoke. She carefully lifted the egg from her back and cradled it against her chest. Through the shell, she could feel the hatchling moving inside. It would emerge soon, perhaps in a day or two. And when it did, what would she feed it? How would she keep it warm when the volcanic storms came? How would she protect it from the toxic air? Velrith had always been strong. She had survived the training all young dragons endured. She had hunted alone in the deep mountains. She had fought off threats to her clan. But this was different. This was not a challenge she could overcome with strength or skill. This was slow death for both her and her child. She looked down at the egg and felt tears burning in her eyes. Dragons did not cry often, but now she could not stop herself. She had committed no crime except loving her child before it was even born. She had hurt no one. Yet here she was, sentenced to watch her baby die. The sky darkened as afternoon turned to evening. Velrith found a small cave in the side of a cliff and crawled inside, pulling the egg close to her body. The cave offered little shelter, but it was better than being exposed to the open air. She curled her body around the egg, trying to share what little warmth she had left. As night fell, the temperature dropped dramatically. The ash waste was scorching hot during the day but freezing cold at night. Velrith shivered, her wings wrapped tight around herself and the egg. She had not eaten in days, and her body had no energy left to produce heat. She thought about her family, the clan she would never see again. Her mother had wept at the trial but had not spoken against the council's decision. Her brother Thoraxus had looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Only the younger dragons had seemed troubled by the sentence, but they were too afraid to speak up. The dragon clans valued tradition above all else. The laws were ancient, created in a time when dragons were fewer and every hatchling needed to be protected. Spring was the season of plenty, when prey was abundant and the weather was mild. Winter was harsh, and eggs laid during that time rarely survived. But Velrith's egg was different. She had felt it from the beginning. This hatchling was strong, stronger than any she had heard of. It had grown quickly, and it moved with vigor inside the shell. If given a chance, she believed it would thrive regardless of the season. Now that chance was slipping away with each passing hour. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and Velrith looked up with alarm. A volcanic storm was approaching, the kind that turned the sky black and rained burning ash. She pressed herself against the back of the cave, using her body to shield the egg from the entrance. The storm hit with terrifying force. Wind screamed through the cave mouth, carrying stinging particles of heated rock. Red lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the hellish landscape outside. The ground shook with distant eruptions, and the air became so hot that Velrith struggled to breathe. She closed her eyes and held the egg tighter. If they were going to die, at least they would die together. She would not let her child come into this world alone and afraid. Hours passed in darkness and chaos. Velrith drifted in and out of consciousness, her body weakening from hunger and exposure. In her fevered dream, she saw green fields and clear skies. She saw her hatchling flying beside her, strong and free. She saw a world where dragon laws were not more important than dragon lives. When she woke, the storm had passed, but she felt a new sensation against her chest. The egg was moving more vigorously now, and she could hear faint scratching sounds from inside. The hatchling was trying to break through the shell. Panic seized her. It was too soon. She had nothing prepared, no food, no safe place for the baby to emerge. But nature did not wait for convenience. The hatchling would come when it was ready, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Velrith forced herself to sit up, though her body protested every movement. She needed to find water, find food, find something before the egg hatched. She stumbled out of the cave, into the gray morning light, and scanned the desolate landscape. Nothing. There was nothing. She threw back her head and released a cry of anguish that echoed across the empty wasteland. It was a sound of grief, of rage, of absolute despair. She had fought so hard to protect her child, and now she was going to fail. As her cry faded into silence, Velrith heard something unexpected. A mechanical sound growing louder. She looked up and saw a streak of fire across the sky. Something was falling, something that was not natural to this world. She watched as the object crashed into the rocks about a mile away, sending up a plume of dust and smoke. For a moment, she simply stared, too exhausted to feel curious. Then a thought occurred to her. Whatever had fallen might contain supplies, perhaps food or water or materials she could use. It was a small hope, almost laughable in the face of her situation. But it was more hope than she had possessed a moment ago. Carefully placing the egg back in the cave, Velrith spread her wings and took flight. Her body protested, but she forced herself into the air. She had to investigate. For her child's sake, she had to try everything, no matter how desperate. As she flew toward the crash site, she did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that the falling object was a ship, or that inside that ship was a human soldier who would soon make a choice that would alter both their lives forever. Captain Marcus Webb groaned as he pulled himself from the wreckage of his reconnaissance shuttle. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow, and his left shoulder screamed with pain. The crash had been violent, but his training and the shuttle's safety systems had kept him alive. Barely. He looked around at what remained of his ship. The hull was torn open like a crushed can. Sparks flew from exposed wiring, and smoke poured from the engine compartment. The communications array was completely destroyed, twisted metal that would never send another signal. His emergency beacon was damaged too, though he managed to activate it before it died completely. Whether anyone would pick up the weak signal in this remote location was another question entirely. Marcus had been a soldier for 15 years, ever since he turned 18 and joined the Terran Expeditionary Corps. He had seen combat on a dozen worlds, survived situations that should have killed him, and earned a reputation as someone who could handle the impossible. But this was bad even by his standards. The pirate attack had come without warning while he was mapping this sector. 3 ships against his small shuttle. He had managed to take out one with a clever maneuver, but the other 2 had damaged his engines. He had limped into this planet's atmosphere, hoping to find somewhere safe to land. Instead, he had crashed in what looked like the surface of hell itself. Volcanic rock stretched in every direction. The air was thick with ash and sulfur, making each breath burn in his lungs. The temperature swung from scorching hot to freezing cold. His environmental suit was damaged. One of the filters cracked during the crash. He had maybe 3 days before the toxic air would start seriously affecting his health, less if he exerted himself. Marcus pulled his emergency pack from the wreckage. Inside, he found rations for 2 weeks. A basic medical kit, a survival knife, a small energy pistol with 1 power cell, and water purification tablets. Not much, but he had survived on less before. He treated his wounds quickly and efficiently, the way he had been trained. The cut on his head was superficial. His shoulder was probably bruised but not broken. He had gotten lucky considering the crash. As he worked, movement caught his eye in the distance. Something large was flying toward him. Marcus grabbed his pistol and took cover behind a boulder, watching as the shape grew closer. His breath caught in his throat. A dragon. He had heard rumors that dragons inhabited some regions of this planet, but he had never expected to encounter one. The creature was massive, easily 40 feet from nose to tail, with wings that spanned twice that length. Its scales were a dull gray color, and it flew with obvious difficulty. Marcus aimed his pistol, knowing it would probably be useless against something that size. Dragons were supposed to be intelligent, but also territorial and dangerous. If it attacked, he was dead. The dragon landed about 50 yards away, stumbling as it touched down. It turned to look at him, and Marcus found himself staring into eyes that showed clear intelligence and something else. Something that looked almost like desperation. For a long moment, they simply watched each other. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the dragon, but he did not fire. The creature made no aggressive moves. It just stood there, breathing heavily, its body language speaking of exhaustion. Then the dragon did something unexpected. It slowly lowered its head and took a step backward, away from Marcus. It was a gesture of non-aggression, maybe even submission. Marcus had studied alien species enough to recognize a peace offering when he saw one. Slowly, carefully, Marcus lowered his weapon. The dragon's eyes followed the movement, and something like relief flickered across its face. Yes, this creature was definitely intelligent. More than intelligent. It was thinking, reasoning, making choices. The dragon turned and began walking away, back in the direction it had come from. After a few steps, it stopped and looked back at Marcus as if waiting. An invitation, or a warning to stay away? Marcus made a decision that went against every regulation in the Terran military handbook. He followed the dragon. They walked for about a mile, the dragon moving slowly enough for Marcus to keep pace. Eventually, they reached a small cave in a cliff face. The dragon gestured with its head toward the cave entrance, and Marcus approached cautiously. Inside the cave, resting on a bed of torn cloth that might have once been part of the dragon's wings, was an egg. Marcus stared at it, understanding flooding through him. This was a mother protecting her child. The dragon made a soft chirping sound, almost like a bird, and touched the egg gently with her snout. Then she looked at Marcus, and he saw something in those eyes that transcended species. It was the look of a parent who would do anything to save their child. Marcus had seen that look before on human faces in war zones. Parents begging him to save their children, to give them food, to protect them from danger. He had never been able to ignore that look, and he could not ignore it now. He unslung his pack and pulled out one of his ration bars. The dragon watched with obvious hunger as he unwrapped it and held it out. She hesitated, clearly suspicious, but desperation won out. She took the food delicately in her teeth and swallowed it in 2 bites. It was barely a snack for a creature her size, but Marcus could see the gratitude in her eyes. He gave her 2 more bars, then a water container. She drank deeply, and some of the life seemed to return to her expression. Marcus sat down on a rock near the cave entrance and pulled out his own ration. As he ate, he studied the dragon and the egg. The mother was malnourished, her scales dull and her body thin. The egg showed signs of imminent hatching, with small cracks appearing in the shell. Using hand gestures and crude drawings in the ash on the cave floor, Marcus tried to communicate. He pointed to himself. "Marcus," he said clearly. The dragon tilted her head, then made a sound that was almost like speech. "Velrith," she seemed to say, or something close to it. Marcus tried to repeat it, and she made an approving rumble. Over the next few hours, they established a basic system of communication. Velrith drew images in the ash showing mountains with caves, then herself being driven away by other dragons. She drew the egg and pointed to the sky, indicating winter or cold. Marcus understood enough to grasp the basics. She had been exiled for having an egg at the wrong time. The concept made Marcus angry. In human culture, protecting children was the highest duty. Soldiers who saved children were given medals. Communities rallied around struggling parents. The idea of exiling a mother for giving birth seemed barbaric to him. He drew his own story. His ship, the attack, the crash. Velrith seemed to understand that he was stranded too, waiting for rescue that might not come. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop. Marcus noticed Velrith shivering as she curled around the egg. His engineering training kicked in. He gathered pieces of metal from his crashed shuttle and used them to create a wind barrier at the cave entrance. He found some thermal moss growing in cracks between rocks and brought it back to help insulate the egg. Velrith watched him work with obvious surprise. When he finished, she made a deep rumbling sound that might have been appreciation. Marcus ate another ration bar and offered Velrith 2 more. His supplies were depleting rapidly, but he could not watch a mother and child starve. He had seen too much death in his career. If he could prevent just 1 more, especially an innocent life, then it was worth the risk. As night fell, a storm began to build on the horizon. Marcus recognized the signs of a volcanic storm, having studied the planet's weather patterns during his approach. This was going to be bad. He worked quickly to reinforce the cave entrance with more metal sheets from his shuttle. Velrith helped, using her strength to position heavy pieces that Marcus could not move alone. They worked together like a team, communicating through gestures and shared understanding. When the storm hit, it was worse than Marcus had anticipated. The wind howled with enough force to tear apart anything not properly secured. Lightning the color of blood split the sky and ash fell like burning snow. The temperature fluctuated wildly, from freezing cold to scorching heat within minutes. Marcus and Velrith huddled in the cave, the metal barrier holding against the worst of the storm. The egg rested between them, protected by both human and dragon. Marcus found it surreal, sitting next to a creature that most humans had never even seen, working together to protect a life that had not yet begun. During a brief lull in the storm, Velrith made a series of soft sounds and touched her head to Marcus's hand. The gesture was clearly one of gratitude and trust. Marcus smiled despite their desperate situation. "We'll get through this," he told her, even though he knew she could not understand his words. "I've survived worse. We'll figure something out." The storm raged through the night, but inside the cave, surrounded by makeshift barriers and heated by shared body warmth, 2 unlikely allies held on. A human soldier who had crashed in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a dragon mother who had been abandoned by her own kind. Neither of them knew it yet, but they had just begun a partnership that would change everything. The storm finally ended on the 3rd day. Marcus woke to find sunlight, weak and filtered through volcanic ash streaming into the cave. Velrith was already awake, her eyes fixed on the egg. The cracks in the shell had grown larger overnight. The hatching would happen soon. Over the past 2 days, Marcus and Velrith had developed their communication system further. They used drawings, gestures, and careful observation of each other's reactions. Marcus learned that Velrith understood more than he had initially thought. She could grasp complex ideas and even seemed to recognize some patterns in his speech. He showed her his military insignia and tried to explain what it meant. Service, duty, protection of others. Velrith had drawn a symbol in the ash that looked like mountains with caves, her clan's mark. She had been part of something larger too before they cast her out. Marcus found himself talking to her even when he knew she could not understand most of his words. There was something comforting about having someone to talk to, even if that someone was a dragon. He told her about Earth, about his family, about the battles he had fought. "I had a little sister," he said one morning while sharing his rations. "Sarah. She was 10 years younger than me. When I left for the military, she cried and made me promise to come back." He smiled sadly. "I did come back for a while. Then I shipped out again and again. Now it has been 5 years since I have seen her. She is grown up now. Probably does not even remember her big brother." Velrith made a soft sound and touched his shoulder with her snout. She did not understand his words, but she understood the tone. Sadness was universal, it seemed. Marcus had been rationing his supplies carefully, but they were running low. He had maybe 4 days of food left, and that was if he ate half portions. He had been giving Velrith more than her fair share, knowing she needed to stay strong for when the egg hatched. On the 4th day, Marcus decided he needed to scout for food. The ash waste seemed completely dead, but there had to be something. Maybe insects or plants that could survive in volcanic soil, or small animals near water sources. He spent hours exploring the area around their cave. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, but eventually his persistence paid off. He found a small colony of rock lizards living in a thermal vent. They were ugly things, about the size of his forearm, but they were edible. He managed to catch 3 before they scattered into cracks too small for him to follow. He also discovered a type of moss that was different from the thermal variety he had found earlier. This moss grew near underground water seeps and seemed to have nutritional value. He gathered as much as he could carry. When he returned to the cave, Velrith made excited sounds at the sight of the lizards. She ate them gratefully, seeming to gain strength from the fresh meat. Marcus tried some of the moss and found it bitter but tolerable. It would stretch his remaining rations. That night the egg began to shake. Velrith became agitated, making worried sounds and pacing around the small cave. Marcus had seen enough nature documentaries to know what was happening. The hatchling was trying to break free. He moved back to give Velrith space, but she kept looking at him, as if wanting him to stay. So he sat against the cave wall and watched as one of nature's miracles unfolded. The egg cracked with a sound like breaking glass. A small snout pushed through, followed by a tiny claw. Velrith made encouraging sounds, touching the egg gently with her nose. More of the shell fell away, and finally, the hatchling emerged. It was small, maybe the size of a large dog, with scales that were silver blue instead of green like its mother's. The most striking feature was a pattern of bright blue markings along its spine, almost like glowing stripes. Marcus had never seen anything like it. The hatchling made a weak chirping sound and stumbled on unsteady legs. Velrith immediately began cleaning it with her tongue, making soft rumbling sounds. The baby responded to her voice, pressing close to her warmth. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. After everything they had been through, the hatchling was alive. Against all odds in this hellish place, life had found a way, but his relief was short-lived. As he watched the hatchling try to stand, he noticed something wrong. Its breathing was labored, coming in short, raspy gasps. Its movements were weak and uncoordinated, more so than a newborn should be. Velrith noticed too. She made distressed sounds and tried to help the baby, but it kept collapsing. Marcus approached carefully, using his medical training to assess the situation. He did not know dragon physiology, but some things were universal. The hatchling was struggling to breathe, its tiny chest heaving with effort. It was sick. Born in harsh conditions without proper nutrition during development, the baby's lungs had not formed correctly. Or maybe it was an infection from the toxic air. Either way, without treatment, the hatchling might not survive more than a few days. Marcus looked at his medical kit. He had antibiotics, but they were designed for humans. He had no idea if they would work on a dragon, or if they might even be poisonous. He had painkillers, bandages, antiseptic, but nothing that seemed right for this situation. Velrith looked at him with pleading eyes. She had brought him her most precious treasure, her child, and she was asking him to help. No, she was begging him to help. Marcus thought hard. He had been in difficult situations before, forced to make decisions with incomplete information. The key was to gather more data and adapt. He needed to understand what the hatchling needed. Over the next day, Marcus observed the baby carefully. He noticed it breathed easier when the air was humid and warm. He rigged up a system using his suit's moisture recycler to create a more humid environment in one corner of the cave. The hatchling's breathing improved slightly. He also noticed Velrith trying to feed the baby by chewing up the rock lizards and passing the softened meat to the hatchling. But the baby could barely swallow. It needed something softer, more nutritious. Marcus experimented with different combinations. He mashed the moss into a paste and mixed it with water and a bit of his nutrient supplement powder. The hatchling managed to swallow small amounts of this mixture. It was not enough, but it was something. Despite his efforts, the hatchling grew weaker over the next 2 days. Its breathing became more labored, and it spent most of its time sleeping. Velrith barely left its side, her eyes filled with anguish. Marcus knew they were losing the battle. He needed real medical supplies, proper medicine, or at least information about dragon care, but he had none of these things. On the 3rd day after the hatching, Marcus sat with Velrith and tried to communicate something important. He drew pictures of plants and mountains, then pointed to the direction where he assumed dragon territory lay. He mimed flying and bringing back something to help. Velrith understood. She became agitated, shaking her head and making negative sounds. She drew herself with other dragons, then showed them attacking her. She drew a symbol that Marcus interpreted as death. She was telling him that returning to Dragonlands meant death for her. The exile was permanent, but Marcus had an idea. He pointed to himself, then to the direction of dragon territory. He drew himself sneaking past the dragons and bringing back medicine. Velrith looked at him like he had lost his mind. She drew dragons breathing fire, showed them much larger than Marcus. She was telling him it was suicide. Marcus smiled grimly. He had done suicide missions before. During the war on Proxima III, He had volunteered to infiltrate an enemy base to rescue prisoners. Everyone said he would die, but he had succeeded, bringing back 27 people who would have been executed. He drew himself successfully, returning with medicine, then pointed to the hatchling. He was telling Velrith that he would do this, that he would save her child. Velrith stared at him for a long time. Then she did something that surprised him. She touched her forehead to his. A gesture he had learned meant deep respect and trust among dragons. She was saying she believed in him. Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing. He checked his energy pistol, though he knew it would be useless against a dragon. He packed light, taking only water and 1 day's worth of food. He studied the landscape, plotting the best route toward the mountains where he assumed the dragon clans lived. Before he left, he knelt beside the hatchling. The tiny dragon looked up at him with clouded eyes, breathing in shallow gasps. Marcus gently touched its head. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. "I am going to get you what you need. Just hold on." Velrith walked with him to the edge of their camp. She made a series of sounds that he had learned meant concern and gratitude mixed together. Marcus nodded to her. "I will be back," he promised. "I did not survive 15 years of war just to let a baby die because of stupid rules." As the sun rose over the ash waste, Marcus Webb began walking toward dragon territory, knowing he was probably walking toward his death. But he had made a promise to a mother and her child, and he had never broken a promise yet. Behind him, Velrith watched until he disappeared from sight. Then she returned to the cave, curled around her struggling hatchling, and waited. She had no choice but to trust the strange human soldier who had appeared in her darkest hour. She had no idea that Marcus was about to start something that would shake dragon society to its core. Marcus had been walking for 6 hours when he first saw the green. After days in the gray and black wasteland of the ash waste, the sight of actual vegetation was almost shocking. Trees grew on distant hillsides and grass covered the lower slopes. This was the edge of dragon territory. He had used his military training to cover ground quickly while conserving energy. The landscape gradually changed from volcanic rock to normal soil. The air became cleaner, easier to breathe. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful, but Marcus was not here for sightseeing. He needed to find a specific plant, one that Velrith had desperately tried to describe through their crude communication system. She had drawn a picture of a flower with 6 petals, growing near water. She had indicated it grew in Dragonlands near the border regions. The problem was that Dragonlands were patrolled. Velrith had made that clear. If they caught him, they would kill him first and ask questions never. Dragons did not trust humans, and humans who sneaked into their territory were obviously up to no good. Marcus moved carefully, using every stealth technique he had learned. He stayed low, used natural cover, and moved only when he was certain no one was watching. His military training had included infiltration techniques, and he had always been good at moving unseen. By late afternoon, he found what he was looking for. A small stream ran through a valley, and along its banks grew clusters of blue flowers with 6 petals each. This had to be the plant Velrith had described. He had no idea what it was called or how it worked, but she had been very clear that this plant could help the hatchling. Marcus pulled out an empty container and began carefully harvesting the flowers. He took the whole plant, roots and all. Not knowing which part held the medicine, he packed them carefully, making sure they would not be crushed. That was when he heard the wings. 3 dragons appeared over the ridge, flying in formation. They were on patrol, scanning the ground below. Marcus dove behind a boulder and held his breath. The dragons circled overhead, their massive shadows passing over his hiding spot. For a tense minute, Marcus thought they might have seen him. But then they continued on their patrol route, moving away to the east. He waited until they were completely out of sight before moving again. He needed to leave dragon territory quickly. Getting in had been risky enough, but staying was asking to be caught. He retraced his steps, moving as fast as he dared while still being careful. He was almost to the border, almost to the safety of the ash waste, when his luck ran out. A massive shadow passed overhead, moving fast. Marcus looked up and saw a dragon diving straight at him. There was no time to hide, no time to run. He drew his energy pistol, knowing it was pointless but unable to just surrender. The dragon landed in front of him with enough force to shake the ground. It was huge, even larger than Velrith, with scales the color of bronze. Its eyes were fixed on Marcus with clear hostility. Human, the dragon said, and Marcus nearly dropped his weapon in shock. It could speak his language. You trespass in our lands. The penalty is death. Marcus raised his hand slowly, the pistol hanging loosely from his finger. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said carefully. I just needed some plants. I am leaving now. The dragon's eyes narrowed. You steal from our territory and expect mercy? You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Marcus admitted. But I had a good reason. Other dragons were landing now, responding to some signal Marcus had not heard. There were 5 of them, all large and clearly experienced warriors. Marcus was surrounded with no chance of escape. The bronze dragon stepped closer. I am Thraxus, patrol commander of the eastern border. You will explain why you are here before I execute you for trespassing. Marcus looked at the dragons surrounding him. He could die here right now, and Velrith's hatchling would die too. Or he could try something crazy. He had nothing to lose. I am helping one of your own, Marcus said clearly. A dragon named Velrith. She was exiled to the Ashwast with her egg. The egg hatched, but the baby is sick. It needs medicine. These plants. He held up the container. So I came to get them. The effect of his words was immediate. Thraxus reared back as if struck. Velrith? He said, his voice suddenly different. You speak of Velrith? She is my sister. Marcus blinked in surprise. Of all the dragons he could have run into, he had found Velrith's own brother. He did not know if that made things better or worse. Your sister is alive, Marcus said. Barely. She is starving in the ash waste, trying to keep her baby alive. The hatchling is sick, probably a respiratory infection. Without treatment, it will die within days. Thraxus stared at him. The child was born? We all thought she would die before it hatched. The council said the exile would prove whether the old gods favored her choice. Well, she survived, Marcus said, anger creeping into his voice, and she had her baby. A beautiful little dragon with silver scales and blue markings. But it is dying because of your laws, because you exiled a mother for giving birth at the wrong time. One of the other dragons, a red female, stepped forward. Human, you do not understand our ways. The laws exist for good reason. Winter births do not survive. They drain resources, weaken the clan. It is not cruelty, it is survival. It is cruelty, Marcus shot back. You are letting a baby die because it was born on the wrong date. In my culture, that is called murder. Thraxus made a low growling sound. You dare judge us? You know nothing of dragon history, of the hard choices we have made to survive. I know a mother begging for her child's life when I see one, Marcus said. I have seen it on a dozen worlds in a dozen species. It looks the same everywhere, and I have never been able to walk away from it. So you risked your life to steal medicine for a dragon child, Thraxus said slowly. Why? What does it matter to you? Marcus met his eyes. Because it is the right thing to do. Because I am a soldier and soldiers protect those who cannot protect themselves. Because I made a promise to your sister that I would save her child, and I do not break my promises. The dragons exchanged glances. Thraxus looked troubled, conflicted. You should not have come here, he said finally. The penalty for trespassing is death. That is the law. Then kill me, Marcus said flatly. But let me give the medicine to Velrith first. After that, do what you want, but do not let that baby die for nothing. Thraxus stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to the other dragons. Leave us, he commanded. I will handle this human. The other dragons looked uncertain but obeyed. They took flight, circling overhead but giving Thraxus and Marcus space. When they were alone, Thraxus sat down and looked at Marcus with an expression the soldier could not read. Tell me about my sister, Thraxus said quietly. Tell me everything. So Marcus did. He told about finding Velrith near his crash site, about her exhaustion and desperation. He told about the volcanic storm they had weathered together, about helping her with what little supplies he had. He told about the egg hatching and the tiny, struggling hatchling with its unusual blue markings. Thraxus listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the dragon was silent for a long time. I did not speak at her trial, Thraxus said finally. I should have, but I was afraid. The council's word is law, and to question them is to risk exile yourself. I told myself that it was for the good of the clan, that the old ways had to be maintained. He looked at Marcus. I was a coward. You still can help her, Marcus said. Come with me. Bring the medicine. See your sister again. Thraxus shook his head. If I return her to the clan, the council will have her executed. And the hatchling, too. The law is clear. Then change the law, Marcus said. You are a commander. You have influence. Make them see that what they are doing is wrong. It is not that simple, Thraxus began, but Marcus cut him off. It is exactly that simple. A baby is dying. Your sister is suffering. You have the power to help them. Everything else is just excuses. Thraxus growled, but there was no real threat in it. You are a very difficult human. I have been told that before, Marcus said. Usually by people who are trying to defend something indefensible. Thraxus stood up and spread his wings. I will take you to Velrith, he said. But you must understand, human, that my help may not be enough. The council will not be pleased that you were in our territory. They will not be pleased that I let you live. And they certainly will not be pleased that I am helping you. I will worry about the council when the baby is healthy. Marcus said, one problem at a time. Thraxus made a sound that might have been a laugh. Very well. Climb on my back. We will fly. Marcus climbed onto the dragon's back, holding tight to the ridge of scales along Thraxus's spine. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. As they launched into the air, Marcus looked down at the landscape falling away beneath them. He had come for medicine and found an ally. Now he just had to hope that ally would be enough when the real trouble started. Velrith looked up in shock as Thraxus landed outside the cave with Marcus on his back. She made sounds of alarm and confusion, torn between joy at seeing her brother and fear that he had come to complete her sentence. Marcus slid off Thraxus's back and ran to the cave. I have the medicine, he called out. Velrith, I got it. The hatchling lay curled against its mother, barely breathing. Its eyes were closed and its small chest moved with painful slowness. Marcus wasted no time. He crushed the blue flowers into a paste, mixed it with water, and carefully dripped the mixture into the baby's mouth. Thraxus approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the tiny dragon. This is the hatchling, he said softly. It is so small. It was born too early and without proper care, Marcus said without looking up. But it is a fighter. It has survived this long. Now we give it a real chance. Velrith watched Marcus work, then turned to her brother. She made a series of sounds that Marcus could not interpret, but the emotion was clear. There was anger there and hurt, but also hope. Thraxus lowered his head to his sister. I am sorry, he said in the dragon language that Marcus could not understand. I should have spoken for you. I failed you as a brother. Velrith touched her snout to his, a gesture of forgiveness. Then she turned her attention back to her baby. The medicine was taking effect. The hatchling's breathing eased, becoming deeper and more regular. Its eyes flickered open, clearer than they had been in days. Marcus sat back with relief. It is working. Thank God it is working. Thraxus studied the human with new respect. You risked your life for a dragon you barely know. For a hatchling that is not even your species. Why? Marcus looked up at him. In the Terran military we have a saying. No one left behind. It means we do not abandon those who need help, regardless of who or what they are. It is about doing what is right even when it is hard. Your people honor such actions? Thraxus asked. We give medals for it, Marcus said. Saving children, protecting the innocent, that is the highest honor a soldier can achieve in human culture. Thraxus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, We have much to learn from humans, it seems. Over the next few hours, the hatchling continued to improve. Its breathing stabilized, and it even managed to eat some of the mashed food Marcus prepared. Velrith made happy sounds, her relief and joy obvious. The tiny dragon, whom Marcus had started thinking of as Kyreth based on sounds Velrith made, was going to survive. But their relief was short-lived. As evening approached, Thraxus suddenly tensed and looked toward the sky. They are coming, he said grimly. The council must have been informed about my unauthorized flight. Marcus saw them then, 5 dragons flying in formation from the direction of the mountains. They landed in a semicircle around the cave, and the lead dragon, old and massive with golden scales, fixed them all with a stern glare. Thraxus, the golden dragon said in a voice like grinding stone, you were seen taking flight with a human. You were seen flying toward the Forbidden Zone. Explain yourself. Thraxus stood straight and tall. Elder Morvax, I found this human in our territory. Instead of executing him immediately, I chose to hear his story. What he told me, it required investigation. Investigation? Elder Morvax's voice was cold. You brought a human to a dragon under exile. You have violated sacred law. I brought help to my sister who was dying. Thraxis said firmly. Her hatchling was dying. Would you have me ignore that? The law is clear, another council member said, a silver female. Exile means no contact, no aid. The exiled must survive or perish by their own strength. That is how we know if the old gods approve. Marcus stepped forward. The old gods have nothing to do with this. This is about whether you care more about laws or about lives. Elder Morvax turned his attention to Marcus, his eyes blazing. Human, you have no voice in dragon affairs. You trespass in our lands, you violate our laws, you dare to judge us? I judge anyone who hurts children, Marcus said without backing down. And that is what your law does. It hurts innocent children for being born at the wrong time. You do not understand, the silver female said. Winter hatchlings drain resources. They cannot hunt for themselves when prey is scarce. They weaken the entire clan. Our laws were created to protect dragonkind. Then your laws are wrong and need to change, Marcus said flatly. The atmosphere became dangerous. Several dragons growled, and Elder Morvax took a threatening step toward Marcus. You dare to tell us our laws are wrong? You, a human who has lived but a fraction of our years? Marcus held his ground. I have lived long enough to know right from wrong. And exiling a mother for loving her child is wrong, no matter how many years you have been doing it. The human speaks truth, a new voice said. One of the council members, younger than the others with scales of deep blue, stepped forward. I am Seraphix, and I have long questioned this law. We created it in ancient times when dragons were few and every resource was precious. But times have changed. We are stronger now, more numerous. Can we not afford compassion? The law exists for a reason, Elder Morvax insisted. We cannot simply change it because one human questions it. What about because your own dragons question it? Thraxis said. I am not alone in my doubts. Many of the younger generation believe our laws have become too rigid, too cruel. We have been afraid to speak, but perhaps it is time. Marcus pulled out a small device from his pocket, a recording unit that had survived the crash. I have been recording everything since I met Velrith, he said. Her suffering, the baby's birth, everything. If anything happens to them, this recording goes to the Terran fleet, and they will know that dragons execute mothers and children for breaking arbitrary rules. He looked at each council member in turn. Humanity judges civilizations by how they treat their most vulnerable. If you kill Velrith and her baby, we will not see you as wise ancient beings. We will see you as monsters who value tradition more than life. You threaten us, Elder Morvax snarled. I inform you, Marcus corrected. Your reputation among humans will be decided by what you do here today. Show mercy, show wisdom, and we can be allies. But if you execute a mother and child in front of me, I will make sure every human in the galaxy knows what kind of society you really are. The threat hung in the air. Dragons and human faced off, the tension thick enough to cut. Then Seraphix spoke again. He is right, she said. Not about the threat, but about the judgment. We claim to be wise, to be better than younger races. But what wisdom is there in cruelty? What honor is there in punishing love? The law, Elder Morvax began. The law was meant to protect us, not destroy us, Seraphix interrupted. But this law has done just that. How many mothers have we exiled over the centuries? How many hatchlings have died because of arbitrary timing? We followed the law because it was always done that way, but that does not make it right. Other dragons were landing now, drawn by the confrontation. Younger dragons, patrol members, even some older ones. A crowd was forming, and Marcus could hear them murmuring among themselves. Thraxis raised his voice. My sister committed no crime except being a mother. Her hatchling, he gestured toward the cave where little Kyrith could be seen now sitting up and looking around with curious eyes, is healthy and strong despite being born in winter. The law said such a thing was impossible, yet here is proof that the law is wrong. Look at the hatchling, Seraphix added. Those blue markings, I have never seen anything like them. Perhaps this child is special, marked by fate. Would we destroy something unique because it does not fit our expectations? Elder Morvax looked torn. The other council members were exchanging uncertain glances. The murmuring crowd was growing louder, with many voices supporting Thraxis and Seraphix. Finally, an older dragon in the crowd spoke up. I lost a daughter to the exile law. She bore an egg in autumn and I never saw her again. I supported the law then because I thought it necessary, but I have mourned her every day since. If we can change this law, if we can prevent other families from suffering as mine did, then we should. Other voices joined in, telling similar stories. Dragons who had lost family members, who had watched loved ones driven away, who had supported the law out of fear rather than belief. Elder Morvax looked around at his people, seeing something he perhaps had not noticed before. The old certainty was cracking. "This is unprecedented," he said slowly. "Then let us set a new precedent," Seraphix urged. "Let us show that dragons can change, can grow, can choose compassion over rigid tradition." The silence stretched out. Marcus held his breath, his hand resting on the device that held his evidence. Velrith stood at the cave entrance, Kyrith peeking out from between her legs, both of them waiting for judgment. Finally, Elder Morvax let out a long breath. "Very well," he said. "The exile is suspended, pending a full review of the law. Velrith and her hatchling may return to the clan lands. And Thoraxis, for your actions, you will not be punished. Instead, you are to be commended for showing courage in the face of injustice." A cheer went up from the assembled dragons. Velrith made a sound of pure joy and nuzzled her baby. Thoraxis bowed his head in respect to the council. Seraphix approached Marcus. "You have done something remarkable today, human. You have challenged an ancient civilization to be better. That takes a special kind of bravery.